I have the honor of being with my good friend and partner and mentor, Mr. Robert Janito. And from the how many we've known each other since Ty Lopez's mansion party, where I'll let him spoil the jokes. He actually came up with another one recently when we went to Toronto about our names. But Mr. Janito is an OG in the crypto space. He is in with a bunch of developers. He is in with all of the people that know anything of use and substance in the crypto space and the Web3 space. He's working on these phenomenal companies that are very, very promising. I've seen a lot of the financial analysis. I've seen the way that these guys move in general. And I just wanted to give you guys an opportunity to get some wisdom out of this incredible human being, incredible entrepreneur. And, thank you so much for joining me, Robert. I know you're a busy, busy boy these days.
Yeah, I'm doing big boy things now, but it's very much an honor to talk with you, Turab. I mean that very sincerely. You're one of my favorite people to talk to.
Dude,
Yeah, and I love that. I love that you. I guess it has to do more with emotions. I love that you're open to that. Emotions fascinate me. I love them, and it really is a big pleasure. You're one of my favorite people that I've met in a long time,
it's
so I'm
mutual,
happy to
man.
do this anytime. Happy to talk with you anytime.
So that's actually a good way for us to start off too,
Hey,
right?
even when
So
I am super busy,
yeah, right. And
happy to talk to you.
it's dude, fucking pleasure. So where our conversation started at Ty Lopez's mansion party, I think we were talking about like souls and we were talking about emotions, and you brought up this incredible statement about how everything really boils down to how we deal with fear. I think that was the and you've clearly done a lot of research and like attended events and talked to a lot of people about this stuff. Can you break that down? Like how does someone in your position that's the CEO of a company that's managing this crazy project and many projects before it deal with fear?
Well, it's been a long time that it took me to realize this, but you know how when you're, I don't know, when you're out in the sun a little too long and you're getting a little too hot, there's a sensation to it. You know, it's like the universe, the physics, the whatever of your body is saying, find someplace cool. You just kind of inherently like learn that. And then you figure out like, oh, it's a little too hot. Right? Like not everything is as obvious as touching a hot stove and then we learn immediately. But then what I learned, it took many years, and I'm very convicted of it. Best way I can put it into words is that the feeling of when something you believe about the world around you and the universe around you, if you believe something around you that is not true, right, you'll have a feeling, and it's fear. Like I heard in the so the New Age world, I'm not a fan of. I mean, no offense to any New Age people watching this, not a fan of it. But one thing that I did hear from the New Age world that blew me away was, oh, fear is just false expectations appearing real. And I was like, whatever, new age person. Whoa, wait a minute. That makes a lot of sense from what I learned about fear. So using this information or applying it has been extremely useful. Often, when we feel fear or worry or anxiety, sometimes we don't want to man up or woman up and call it what it is, fear. Letting fear guide me to finding like what is it I believe about my surroundings, the world, the universe, other people. What is it I believe that's not true? Has become an incredible way to get out of my own way in terms of success.
So in terms of the how do you actually if you've believed something for so long, right? How do you allow yourself to step outside enough to actually reframe things? Like what do you use certain techniques, or are you constantly looking for this type of inspiration? Like
Yeah, yeah, and it's developing all the time. It started with me realizing how to. It started with me finding a way to use triggers. So by trigger, I mean getting triggered emotionally, feeling angry suddenly, or somebody bringing up a subject that I just did not want to talk about, or someone talking about something and I just felt very judgmental, like, oh God, this new age crap. I'm gonna poo poo on new age stuff the whole time just for fun.
no worries.
Yeah, I don't have any negatives about it, but so it started with, yeah, it started with realizing that behind every trigger was something that I learned a lot like a caged tiger learning. Like you see in the circus, a lion or a tiger, etc. They listen to commands and it's a lot of it's brought by fear or they're going to get whipped, etc. Now I'm not an expert in that area, but what made sense to me was, oh, like these triggers, it's nearly like I don't have control over them. It's nearly like I'll undergo this emotional process that I didn't choose. I didn't sit there and go, ooh, this would be a great time to get that adrenaline rush. It'd be awesome. Well, I really didn't have that choice, or at least I didn't think I did. So I realized that triggers were actually a huge opportunity. Unexpectedly, triggers are a huge opportunity to learn something, right? To learn something about yourselves, self, or how you were maybe programmed, or how we all come up with conclusions to situations. So triggers, I realized, are a way to allow us to become aware of these conclusions that we jump to. And so when I realized that, one of the first things I did was use social media to scroll and find what triggered me. So instead of responding to it and being like, "You're so dumb, that's not true, yeah, you're an asshole," like instead of saying things like that, and sometimes there were things I'd be like, "No, I don't want to see that," and I would scroll real fast. So instead of reacting to them in the way of responding to them, I would use social media to find what topics were triggering me. That's where it
So
started.
through this, you basically, so you went through a very conscious effort of tackling your fears by virtue of understanding what triggers them first. It kind of
Well,
desensitizing yourself, or at
it didn't
least
really
allowing yourself to dwell in it for a second.
it didn't really start with fear stuff. It After a while it became like me understanding that it had a lot to do with fear, and I didn't realize that before.
It's
Yeah, so I don't want this to seem like misspoke, but it definitely started with realizing that anytime I was triggered, that it was like a program. So it was an opportunity for me to either be triggered and be pissed off, or be triggered and be sad, or it was an opportunity to recognize that event triggered something, that event specifically. Like, we'll see things that trigger one person do not trigger the other. We even have this culture today where people are making fun of people being triggered, where they're saying like triggered, right? But it turns out, and I'll say with full conviction, triggers are incredibly valuable to us when we're aware of them. Incredibly valuable to us. And it sounds almost like you're like you asked, hey, where did that start? There was an area that went to after that.
so okay. Now, you've been part of some tremendous companies in your ascent to your prowess in the field of Web3 and crypto. I just wanted to get a lowdown on, young Robert, in maybe in college and high school. Like, what is it that got you interested in technology like this? I'm curious.
Technology like blockchain or technology in general. I'll start with technology in general. I don't know when it started. Maybe I was 11. I think I was 10, 10 or 11, 12. Yeah, I was 10 or 11. I was fascinated with the game Mortal Kombat, and I wanted to make my own fatalities, damn it. And I wanted to make my own moves. And people did not have an answer for me of how to make your own fatalities, right? Adults, we go to them as children to find out answers. But here, the answer made no sense. Like, the answer was, little Robert, you don't make your own fatalities. Those are the fatalities that come with the game. These poor adults just trying to simplify something complicated to me, and they don't know at the same time. And maybe I talked with an adult who did know, but my thought was, I want to make some fatalities. I want to make my own fighting game. This would be awesome. I'm gonna make my own game. If somebody had to have made it. God did not make Mortal Kombat, okay? Maybe God did. Just kidding. But I just knew that it was made by human beings. And if it was made by human beings, of course I could do it too. So that's what really started. I went to the library. I found out that I needed to learn programming, computer programming. I thought, great, let me learn computer programming. So I went to the library. It was like elementary school library, literally. I was in fifth grade. And I got a book on computer programming. And I was like, school is finally useful. A book on programming, and I read it. And after reading it, I was like, great, this didn't tell me shit about programming, right? Like, I was a little frustrated. I hated reading, and I read this whole book to figure out how to program. And it didn't, the book was for kids in elementary school. The book was, oh, programming is done by somebody using a computer and something called a compiler, like BASIC. So it didn't teach me anything about programming, but it did at least solidify that I needed a computer.
And that there's much to learn. Yeah,
Yeah.
I guess it opened up your gates and your eyes to like, okay, well, what is a compiler? What are the avenues that I need to go down in order to get this fatality? So you had this goal based on passion, and then you went out of your way to kind of start piecing it and parsing it. Did you ever get to a point where you created a fatality?
Every time I was learning, I felt like it was one more step until learning how to make a fatality. Like, all right, got to learn some art. Great. I learned how to do some digital art, right? Which was way different back then than today. And I was like, next, I'll know how to fatality. And then later it was like, oh, no, no, no. It's like, clearly there's animation, yes, but there were a lot of things that kept coming in the way. But no, I never made a fatality ever. I just kept getting learning more and more and finding a lot of interest and a lot of fascination with video game developers. By the time I was 15, I maybe made like five different games, three or four fully completed games. Three were clones of other games. One was my take on Yahtzee, the dice game. So yeah, it was a clone, but there were no Yahtzee games that existed. You might be able to find it online. It was called Dicey, Dicey. Made it for MS-DOS and later released it for Windows. If you did, you would find it under the name Aero Zeppelin, Aerozeplyn.
I'm gonna
Maybe, maybe
casually
not.
look this up while you're telling the story, and then I'm gonna prompt you with some more stuff here.
Yeah. So I ended up making software and finding out that computers didn't do all the things that you wanted them to do. And actually, probably one or two games that were not completed, but they were like demos. Yeah.
So you basically you set this goal, this very difficult goal as an 11-year-old, right? Then you went for the next 4 years of your life at least, thinking on and off about this thing and kind of like a passion project. And then you also, by virtue of having that fairly unattainable, like difficult goal at the time, I'm sure like an adult would experience, made that fatality. You went and you said, okay, fine. The fatality is not so interesting anymore. The
It
technology
was
is
still
so interesting.
interesting, but I was starting to realize how far it was. Instead of it being the next step, I was starting to realize how much further it would be to make your own fighting game that eventually has a fatality.
So then you had like these other projects in mind that were like, okay, cool. I can wrap my head around making this game based on this other game and this other thing. And so it's something I talk about a lot is the importance of starting a project, right? And the importance of saying to yourself, dude, I don't know how to do this thing, but let's figure it out. And so where did this like passion for developing and video games take you? Did you go to college?
No, the inevitably when I was 15, I was washing dishes, and then somebody came up to me and said, "Hey, we noticed in your resume." Yeah, I gave a resume to wash dishes. We noticed in your resume that you do computer programming and that you've made some video games. I was like, "Yeah, yeah, that's right." And this was a bowling alley that I was washing dishes for. And they're like, "Oh, we'd like you to talk with somebody." And I talked to this person. I said, "Hey, how would you like a job? Putting computers together, right? Like, okay, we need computers to be put together for something." It turned out it was for this company, Cubica. Cubica makes automatic scoring software company thingy. They make automatic scoring systems for bowling alleys. I don't know if they still do. I wouldn't be surprised if they're still in business. The only ones I hear of now are like Brunswick and AMF, or maybe both of those companies bought each other. I don't know. But probably like I was still 15. My boss at the time, I remember I'm sitting there putting some little computer thing together. Oh no, no, I'm sorry. I wasn't putting a computer thing together. I was doing some graphics because I was helping out with graphics. I knew how to use Photoshop back then. And I had put together a manual for a competitor to Cubica software. I put together a manual. I was making some graphics for it, and I'm on the computer. I'm like very focused, and then I hear out of nowhere, "So you think you know assembly language?" And I'm like, "What the heck did that come from?" Right behind me, the my boss that had hired me. I'm just like, "Whoa! How long have you been back there?" He's like, oh, I don't know, like a half hour. This guy, whenever he would compile this code, it took about a half hour, and he would just kind of like veg out, I guess. Plus, it was at the end of the day because I was going to school still, and I was like, yes, I do know assembly language. And he just started firing off these questions at me, like, yeah, right. Like, well, is it true? Does this kid really know assembly language? And he's like, okay. He's like, what's int 30? Or what's int? What is int? Right? Or no, I think his first question was like, what processor? I'm like a 8086. It's like, was the instruction int? It's an interrupt. Okay, what's int 10? And I'm just like going on, I was like, it, changes the video driver or whatever it was. And so he's like, oh, okay, I guess this kid does know assembly language. I only knew assembly language because the only way to plot pixels on the screen faster, or the only way to reliably initialize the mouse driver and all these things that like old games did was to know assembly language and use assembly language. There weren't libraries for all these things to exist. And so, anyways, then he realized, okay, this kid really does like program and stuff. We talked some more. I ended up helping with some programming in Pascal, a language that I didn't know at the time, but then I learned. And then from there, I ended up realizing how much demand there was in this area. I had college kids wanting help for me with programming. I ended up pivoting pretty quickly to things like JavaScript, things like personal homepage tools, which later became PHP, hypertext processor, PHP. Yeah, it was the demands of the world around me was like, we need your help. We want your help. Do you really, know this stuff? Do you really know that stuff? Oh my God.
So it
There's a
just
lot more I could say
continued.
about that.
Yeah, no, I could imagine. I mean, it's such a beautiful thing to, I'm sure, think back to that time because it was a simpler time, but you were still doing these things that I'm sure to some degree you're proud of, young Robert, to take on these responsibilities and then to grow and learn all of these things. So you've had this curiosity for a number of years. Now, what was the first major position that you landed that you believe really was substantial in your life, like that like really upped the level, that really upped the ante of what Robert's been learning for X amount of years?
There were quite a few of them. There were quite a few of them, especially when I had taken on I guess you can say kind of like a discrete contractor position for a cyber warfare company. I learned an unusual amount from that. An unusual amount like in the world of like research and security, in a world that I didn't really recognize. And then not too long after that, well, actually, maybe like 2 years after that. Yeah, 2 years after that, when I had already done some stuff with like Bitcoin and learned about Bitcoin, looked at Bitcoin's code just to analyze it. I also had a pretty significant hire where it was a salary position for a company called ClickBooth. And it was significant. I say it was significant because my parents, my relatives, and such viewed it like, "Oh, congratulations, Robbie! You have a full-time job now." And I'm like 27, 28 years old. And I realized like people, they didn't see. I realized even my family members, I didn't get a chance to talk with them much about this. But my take was they would tell me time and time again, "Hey, you should go to school and do something," because I never went to college. And there was a time where I was still programming part time. I programmed part time almost like my whole life on a contractual basis. And a time where I was a professional drummer for 6 years. I did probably the least amount of programming in that 6 year period. But there was a time where while I was touring, while I was on a bus, I was also doing some contract work on the side. So here, I say that this is significant because it's technically the first, yeah, it is absolutely the first company that I've ever worked full time for. You might be part of a partnership or something in the music world and it's not really like a full-time salary gig. And suddenly my family stopped suggesting me to go to school and all these things. So I noticed that and I was just kind of like, oh, I see. Now you guys think I magically made it just because I have a salary position. So I had that salary position for maybe a year. And that was the last time I had a salary position like that.
So clearly your family was not like engaging in this passion that you had for technology, right? Like it was kind of like this thing that you kind of did as a hobby, or like they weren't entirely sure how much time really you were spending on it. And obviously, I assume you were still living at your family home for like when did you end up moving out?
I was 19 when I moved out.
Okay. So
Yeah, so
basically
pretty young.
from 19 to like 27, like the close people that you grew up with and you spent a lot of time with didn't really know what you were up to.
Yeah, my dad had this hilarious story he told me maybe when I was like 30. He was telling me about how, at this time, like when I was a kid, I think I was 14 or 13, I think I was 13 when this happened. It was a time where parents were like, hey, you need to, or news and such, I don't know, the influences of society were like, parents, you need to see what your kids are doing because adults are trying to have sex with them. So you need to make sure they're protected online. I'm quite transparent. When I was 14, I was trying to hook up with adults. Just saying.
No way. I could totally see it though.
When I say adults, I mean beautiful women that were way beyond my league. And so my mom and my dad, they wanted to know, what is this kid doing? He better not be getting laid. Sorry, I think this is a hilarious topic actually, but because of the fact that that's not what I was doing, although, I say, hey, openly, yeah, of course, I was like, I was a teenager, right? But the programming part was something that I was obsessively doing constantly. I had to figure out how to make those Mortal Kombat fatalities. And so my mom and dad, my dad was telling me this story about how they were like, you know what? We need to figure out what he's doing. And we really don't know how to figure out what he's doing. And this is the hilarious story for programmers. So if you're not a programmer, this might not make a whole lot of sense, but my mom goes, Robert begged me at Barnes and Noble's to buy him a C++ book. And yeah, he's looking at it all the time and reading it. So my dad, my mom, they're like, okay, well, let's figure out what he's getting into. So they open up this C++ book, which is a programming language. And these programming books, they don't tell you, hey, parents, attention, or they don't tell anybody like, hey, you reader, this book is about programming and using the programming language called C++ to learn how to make stuff, right? There's no intro like that. The C++ book, I don't remember if it was learn C++ in 24 hours or if it was the C++ for Dummies book. But my dad's telling me, he goes, so we looked at this book and you're like 13. And the first thing that comes up is like object oriented programming and polymorphism and inheritance. And they're just like, what the is that? And like virtual templates or, something like this. And they're just like, they're reading this. And he told me that they spent a half hour looking at it. And they were just like, we really don't know what the hell he's doing. We were a little worried when we saw like inheritance and stuff that it
Dude,
might have something to do with sex, but they just laughed about it and they're like, "Wow, we literally have no idea what he's doing."
but it just goes to show, right? Like you have this genius that comes up in humanity, and these kids that are put through this education system and don't have that consistent drive, that passion that they found, you know, they'll kind of like rope along in the system and get to a point where that passion doesn't matter because as long as you're doing what the status quo says, right, then everyone around you will applaud your performance. But for years, I mean from 19 to 27, you basically spent all of that time doing exactly what you're passionate about. I don't know. Did you have like a lot of friends at that time? Were you spending a lot of time like alone, like kind of building your skill set and really diving into the languages and concepts?
My social skills did suffer quite a bit to the point where when I was like 18 or 19, I discovered that one of my communication methods with people was making sounds to describe things, and people didn't understand that. So my social skills suffered a little bit, but I really wasn't aware of that. I still had friends that liked me a lot, and I liked my friends, and we got along. We had LAN parties. Like I threw like one of the first LAN parties at the high school that I went to, and never threw another LAN party, but everybody else did. And I would go to them quite often. I loved the LAN parties. I loved gaming, but after gaming, I made games. After gaming, I was programming constantly.
And so you've told me so you worked with this defense company, and then you worked with you said Click something,
Click Booth.
Click Booth, and what was this company doing?
It was a advertising company. They were like either founded or co-founded. The main guy was John Lemp. They were like one of Google's main competitors for cost per action kind of campaigns.
Okay, so you're what part of the company were you particularly salaried for?
I think it was like a junior software developer. With the interview that I had there and the first things that I did, I could see that the reason why they hired me is, they needed help in the world of APIs or programming APIs or some ways so that their inventory of ads that they had to sell could connect with other networks and supply that inventory and vice versa. It was something like that. So they had hired me along for that.
And so you had this position full time, but you were saying that you got into the Bitcoin space and you started to understand some of this Web3 stuff that was going on. It didn't have this name. It didn't, was it even called crypto at that point?
Yeah, cryptocurrency was a word that was put out many, many times. Myself, probably 3 or 4 dozen other people. We started the crypto